So we have now 6 blueberry bushes. We have 4. We planted 2 more in the spring. So usually in the spring or in the summer, we make a blueberry pie from the blueberries that we grew.
This is Dr. Thomas Kimble. He also goes by Tommy or Dad.
My grandmother was very, very much into gardening. I would do that with her as a little kid. So, after school, I would be out in the garden planting vegetables, and we grew everything. We had plum trees, peach trees, an apple tree, a pear tree, a pecan tree, eventually a fig tree. I remember my grandmother being the history teacher, and other members of my family were primarily educators. My great-grandmother was a teacher. My grandmother was a history teacher. My mother was an English teacher, eventually became a coordinator in the school system. My father was a principal, a former biology teacher. So, I had it from the academic standpoint coming at me from all angles. So I did kid things, right? But the difference is if I misspoke or if I didn't say something correctly, I would have to stop and say it again the correct way.
Okay, I might be 10. Kids might be 6. They never taught nothing like that stuff went on.
I came from a family where we had dinner around the table. The TV was off and we had to sit around the table, and that's where I heard some of these great stories.
I don't care how young they were. You said yes, ma'am, to every lady.
My grandparents were both very active in the civil rights movement. My grandfather was a pastor and a politician. He was a pastor of a church in Atlanta and was friends with Martin Luther King and the King family. And an interesting bit of trivia, my grandfather was the one that helped to organize the first delivery of the I Have a Dream speech that Martin Luther King gave.
So yeah, you could say education was kind of the family business. But it was more than that. It was how they lived, how they loved, and how they made sure the next generation always had something solid to stand on. And that's the thing. Those moments, those family stories, they weren't just about the past. They were his faith.
I specialize in reproductive medicine and contraception, and I'm a obstetrician and gynecologist, and I take that very seriously. And I was actually formerly the chair of the contraception section, or the American Society of Reproductive Medicine. I was involved with the research and development and the creation of many contraceptives that are out there and available today. One of the proudest things I have done is to write a prescription for a medication that I was involved in its development.
Tommy was living his dream, a different path than everyone at the dinner table. But he later discovers that life was about to write him a prescription he didn't plan to fill.
I, myself, had an unplanned pregnancy with my partner at the time. And I think about that, and if I or somebody expert in reproduction, I have resources, I have an education. If that could happen to me, what about my patients who don't have all of the knowledge, don't have all of the resources, don't have access to contraception? I always think about that for every prescription I give and in my counseling as well. So when I found out that I had an unplanned pregnancy, I was in shock. How is this happening to a physician, OBGYN, who was chair of the contraception interest group for the American Society of Reproductive Medicine? And at first I was embarrassed. But not long. I was excited and I was happy to be a father. But I took so much from that. and it made me a better physician because I understand. And I understand where my patients are coming from. Some people practice medicine from an ivory tower. I want to practice medicine with my patients. And I learned that from my own experience. I was in my late 30s at the time, and I had resources, and I had a supportive family, and so I recognized it was time. And I was just so excited about my future son. So I found myself eventually as a single father. I grew up with a single mom. I learned a lot from my mom and how to manage things.
You okay? I know. You all right?
My mother was 19 years old when she had me. She was a busy professional and continued to teach while going to graduate school. And there were times I was sitting in the classroom beside her as a toddler when she was in graduate school. And she was always supportive of my endeavors to become a physician. And when I graduated from medical school, my family threw a graduation dinner celebration, and my mom gave a speech and a toast congratulating me, and then announced that she finished her doctorate. And so we had 2 doctors in the family. I think about that as a parent myself, as a single father, and all that my mother sacrificed and her struggles. And it gets tough. It's not always easy to manage seeing patients and getting to school events and getting to the basketball practice for him, but we make it happen. And I was very fortunate to have a role model in my own mother and other members of my family. Now, what that has done for me as a physician is I get it with my patients. Sometimes people are running a few minutes late. Sometimes people have their kids with them in the exam room. Some providers don't like that, but I get it. You know, I sat there in my mother's college classes with her, and somebody gave her the grace to let that occur. And so I think that has made me a better physician because I understand grace.
It would be enough if that was how he treated patients, but his reach became far greater in his next opportunity, one that he was destined for.
At the medical school, I am the Assistant Vice Dean of Admissions and Enrollment. Now, my background is I'm an OBGYN, and it was not on my radar to get into academia and administration. I was the one that decided I was going to do something different and go into medicine. And then I circled right back and ended up being a teacher.
In the same way he returned to his roots, moving into his new role, he looked to the roots of the institution he was a part of.
The vision of EVMS is to be recognized as the most community-oriented medical school and school of health professions in the country. When I came here to do my fellowship, that is what I fell in love with about this institution. We were not part of a larger university that one day said, let's create a medical school so that we can recruit more undergraduates to come here. No, we were actually born out of our community. There were community members involved, community leaders, politicians, physicians. We had the support of Old Dominion University and Norfolk State University in our founding. On one day, I see patients in the morning. Then in the afternoon, I am doing research in my lab. And then later in the afternoon, I'm giving a lecture and working on accepting new medical students. That's a lot, but I love that diversity. I think I'd get bored if I was just doing one thing day in and day out. As an admissions dean, it's tough to select out of thousands of applications. We typically get anywhere from 6,000 to almost 8,000 applications a year, and we have a class of 151 seats. So how do you go from all of those applications down to that small percentage? Yes, the standardized scores are very important, but what other non-cognitive aspects of an applicant are important, like their lived experiences, what they have done for their community?
So legacy can look like the clinic, the classroom, or the garden. In Dr. Kimble's case, it looks like all of the above. Visit our website, truthbetoldcommunity.com, to find out ways to get involved and share this episode with friends. This series was written by Jackie Glass and Hannah Sobel, edited and hosted by me, Nicole Hill, sound designed by Trindell Lightburn, and our work has been supported by the Elizabeth River Trail Foundation through a National Park Service Chesapeake Gateways grant, as well as a grant from Virginia Humanities. Follow our work by subscribing wherever you get your podcasts. We couldn't do this without people brave enough to share their experiences, so thank you, Dr. Kimble.